What's going on guys, खुश है and we're back with a new video. And आज की वीडियो में शुरू के थोड़ा सा फेल हो गया है कि हम जहाँ जाने वाले थे शनिवार वाड़ा वो बंद है और 9 बजे खुलने वाला है. बट तब तक यहाँ के स्ट्रीट्स काफ़ी एस्थेटिक लग रहे हैं, काफ़ी ओल्ड टाइप से लग रहे. So I thought कुछ वीडियोस भी लिया जाए यहाँ पे. And we can also get started with the main video, which are 5 mistakes you should avoid as a beginner filmmaker. For that also just a big shout out to my friend Monish, जो सुबह सुबह उठ के आए मेरे लिए और जो हमारा सुबह फेल हुआ. बट हाँ, जब तक वो खुलता है हम वीडियो के साथ स्टार्ट कर ही लेते हैं. तो ब्रो के पास एक नया गिम्बल है जो मैंने ट्राई नहीं किया, RS2. मतलब ब्रो का नहीं है बट ब्रो का है. बट फिर भी काउंट करता ब्रो का है. सो ये अभी सेटअप करते हैं हम एंड लेट्स गो. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is frame rate. So mainly there's 3 main frame rates that I always use: 25, 50 and 100 FPS. Usually I always stick to 25 because, like, think about the most cinematic film you might have seen. That was shot in 25 FPS. And now try and remember when you were last watching a game of cricket. That was super smooth and super fast. So the difference here is that was shot in 60 FPS, and sometimes it's always shot a little higher than 60, like 100 FPS, sometimes sports. That's because you want everything in focus. You don't want any motion blur. Like right now, you see my hand, there is some motion blur. Right now we're shooting in 25 FPS to get the most cinematic look. If I wanted to shoot something that's a little slow-mo, for example the cinematics you saw in the beginning of the video, that was all shot in 60 FPS. Alright, so remember, 25 FPS, keep the most cinematic frame rate, 50 FPS if you want to slow it down, and if your camera does have it, 100 FPS to get the slowest footage ever. Let me show you a bit of an example of the differences between the three. Vlog कर रहा है तू? हाँ. So मोनिश गिम्बल पे बहुत ज़्यादा enjoy कर रहा है. RSC बहुत सही है. So let's find a spot and bro, कुछ खाना है क्या पहले हल्का सा?
हाँ, खा सकते हैं.
ये सही लग रहा है.
दिस प्लेस या द इडली?
हाँ ब्रो, चल मुझे भी भूख लग रही है. खा लेते फिर स्टार्ट करते वीडियो में. Point number 2 is getting the right exposure in camera itself, because sometimes when we are shooting we tend to maybe overexpose a little bit or maybe even underexpose in camera, and when we have beginner cameras it gets a little difficult to color correct and color grade them in post. I'd recommend getting the right exposure in camera itself. For example, figure out what the main subject is. For example, in this shot I am the main subject, so you would look at me and my exposure and make sure that is correct. Leaving apart the shadow, maybe the sky might be a little overblown, the shadows might be a little too dead, as long as my exposure is proper. And also just a pro tip for you guys, try and understand where the lighting is according to you. Right now in the morning the sun is on my right side, so taking that into account, something like maybe me standing towards the sun and getting my face properly exposed. Or if you want to go a little moody, we can move the camera from here to here, have one side more lit and the other side be a little dark, make it a little contrasty, but not putting the camera on the opposite side of the sun, which will make my entire background overblown. I would be underexposed and this shot just wouldn't look good. So it's best to work with the light, don't work against the light. So मैं पहली बार आया हूँ यहाँ पे शनिवार वाड़ा में, and सही जगह लग रहा है. It's a काफ़ी historical place as well. So since we've already come here, let's go explore this place as well. चल bro, चल भाई दिखा मेरे को. ये भाई बोले आ चुके 10-15 बार यहाँ पे, so दिखाने वाले. It's some tour guide one. So we are now exploring the fort. This place is really cool actually. There are like a bunch of different corners where that's pretty isolated, and we can easily record our video here as well, which is really neat. And यहाँ पे आगे is like the road. हम यहीं पे गए थे कुछ खाना खाने के लिए. And आगे जो है I believe वो fort का main part है. So we're gonna go and check that place out now. Bro, this guy took probably the most badass shot ever. मैं यहाँ पे corner पे था and he's like, bro बाहर आ जा. Bro कैसे आया shot?
Bro, I'll show you.
Alright, so the next point is using the wrong lens. So sometimes when you get your new camera, you have the kit lens, which in my case was the 18 to 55. And usually I always used to just leave my lenses at 18 and move all around. Like I never used to zoom in a lot. So usually there are different focal lengths to tell different parts of a story. For example, I personally really like the look of a wide angle lens, but that's not always right for each situation. So right now what we're using is basically a 35 which is a very close middle ground. 35 to 50 is what really looks close to life like. Like right now what you're looking at is basically how it looks in real life. And if you go wider, which is probably 16 or 15 that's usually most for establishing shots all around. So if you want to establish a new location, or if you want to have an introductory shot to your video, a 16 or any ultra wide lens will do. Then you can usually shift to a more medium frame, which could be a 35 or a 50 like we are using now. And if you want to get a more compressed background, you can use a telephoto lens. For example, a telephoto would be 200 or even more. So if you can't get closer to the subject, or you want to compress the background enough to make it look much bigger than it actually is. So this where we are now is the main gate. हम यहीं से अंदर आए थे, मतलब इसके नीचे से. We are now on top of it. So this is probably the main spot you can say of here. And ये आता है भाई व्यू. तो बहुत सही दिख रहा है. अभी स्काई भी और अभी स्काई भी एकदम मोड़ी है. सो काफ़ी सही आ रहे शॉट्स. भाई गार्ड ने मना किया ये सब यूज़ करने से, तो हम वापस नीचे जा रहे हैं.
ऐसे ही रहता है ब्रो, हर शूट में कहीं भी जाओ, बस ये DSLR देख लिया ना, ख़त्म.
हाँ यार, मैंने बहुत एक्सपीरियंस किया कि भाई DSLR या कुछ गिम्बल में दिख जाए तो लोग बोलते हैं चलो भाई यार अलाउड नहीं है, नहीं तो उनको समझता भी नहीं है.
इट्स नॉट अ प्रॉब्लम. तुम आईफोन पे शूट कर रहे हो, कभी नहीं होगा. बट अगर तुमने DSLR देख लिया तो ख़त्म.
Fourth thing is bad audio. Audio plays a really key important role in videos. Think about the last time you have watched a movie. Other than the visual aspect of it, think about the sounds you might have heard. Sound effects, the person speaking, what environmental sounds would have been there. So all of these key elements have come together to make that one video. So like that, when we make videos, we need to think about sound as well. So I would not recommend using the in-camera microphone. Buy a mic, buy any mic. Like right now I'm using a Boya mic. There's no audio problems or anything, and it's much better than my in-camera microphone. Another small point is your audio levels. Keep your audio levels between -12 and -6. Don't let it go too loud. Otherwise it'll sound like this and it will sound really bad. Lastly, just keep the microphone to you as close as possible. So right now the microphone is like right here, like hands distance away. Try and keep it as close as possible so you can get the best audio. The more further away the mic is, the better the audio will get. Let me show you how. Like right now you might not even be able to hear me. The audio is so bad. So now that I'm closer, the audio must be much better. So keep the mic as close as possible. Last point is using emotion to tell a story. For example, the sequence you saw in the beginning of this video, the B-roll, the color grading, the sound effects, the lighting, and all of these aspects put together to make one emotion of a video. That's what you can call filmmaking in the end. It's emotions using framing and all these things. Alright, that's it for today's video. Thank you if you made it to the end. And abhi to hum McDonald's aa chuke hain, fries aa chuke hain. Alright guys, see you in the next video. Bye. Also do make sure to subscribe to Monish's channel. वो जल्दी YouTube चैनल खोलने वाला है. सो अगर जब ये वीडियो रिलीज होता है उसका YouTube चैनल चालू है तो लिंक विल बी इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन बिलो.
यस सर.
भाई जो जल्द YouTube वीडियो डालेंगे.
Yes.
तो मैंने उसको बहुत मोटिवेट किया YouTube वीडियो डालने के लिए. तो वो बोले मैं भी YouTube वीडियो डालूंगा. सो बहुत YouTube वीडियो बोल दिया मैंने यार. ठीक है छोड़ भाई, उसका लिंक इन डिस्क्रिप्शन है.